BSO actually cooked its own crack cocaine in this building right here to use for undercover drug busts.
What the hell did you just say?
BSO actually cooked its own crack cocaine in this building.
What you talking about, Willie?
Without cops, who would cook the crack in the courthouse, distribute the crack from the courthouse, and then arrest you and charge you and convict you in the very same courthouse? That's what's happening with, or that's what happened from 1988 to 1990 from the Broward County Sheriff's Office. Check this out.
Now, drug arrests dating back decades in Broward County are finally being cleared.
Those accused of buying crack made by law enforcement could soon have their records vacated. Local 10's Janine Stanwood is live to explain. Janine.
Wait, crack made by law enforcement. Hey, what's the problem out on the street, boys? We got crack cocaine. What's the solution? Let's make more crack cocaine and send it out on the streets. Good idea, coppers.
Decades ago, when Nick Navarro was sheriff, BSO actually cooked its own crack cocaine in this building right here to use for undercover drug busts. The courts found that that wasn't unconstitutional within itself, but they...
Wait a second. They found that it's not unconstitutional to cook crack cocaine in a courthouse building. So if it's not unconstitutional for them to create this, then why is it unconstitutional for you to create it? Oh, that's right. It's not, because there's nothing in the Constitution that says that you can't manufacture a certain item. As a matter of fact, something happened before the Constitution called the Declaration of Independence that you have an unalienable right to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. And if that's what makes you happy, it's dangerous. It's not good for your health. It could end in your demise, your untimely demise. You can still do it because you're an American and you're free. So they've declared themselves to be immune once again from something else that you're not immune from. And they can cook this product in their own courthouse.
did find that people who were arrested for buying this stuff should have their cases cleared. But the state attorney now has found that that hasn't happened for possibly thousands of cases. Now he wants to help. It was the height of the crack cocaine epidemic for the Broward Sheriff's Office.
Open it up. More!
And one
Look at this, look at this. We're going to save you from those drugs, doggone it. By putting a gun right next to this guy's cheekbone. What the frick?
Tactic that made headlines.
They decided we're going to manufacture our own crack and have detention deputies pose as drug dealers out on the streets.
The drugs are being cooked at the courthouse on the 7th floor.
The state Supreme Court ruled in 1993 the practice was outrageous.
Cooked in this courthouse on the 7th floor. Created, manufactured in the courthouse, distributed from the courthouse. All the convictions take place in the courthouse. You know, other people might call this a criminal drug network or a criminal drug cartel. The problem is the Mexican drug cartel is better because when they sell their product to their customers, they create happy repeat customers. They don't throw them into jail. When the cops create their product, they sell them to their customers, and then the customers go to a jail cell.
On the 7th floor.
The state Supreme Court ruled in 1993 the practice was outrageous, and those arrested should have their records cleared.
He was found not guilty.
Now, more than 30 years later, State Attorney Harold Pryor announcing there could be thousands still on the hook, and the state has an obligation to fix it.
How many lives have been ruined, destroyed? How many families have been torn asunder? How many jobs lost? How many other people turn to probably a life of crime because it's like, well, you're going to consider me a criminal anyway? You know, how much criminal activity did this kind of drug making activity in this courthouse actually spark on the streets of Florida? You know, it appears to me that when cops get involved in this kind of thing, they exacerbate things. They make things worse. Criminal activity increases. It kind of reminds me of the Prohibition back in the 1920s, from 1920 to 1933. Not only did cops and politicians make matters worse, instead of eradicating crime, they increased crime, gave rise to major criminal operations. Alcohol cartels began to form. Police officers were on the take because they became basically it was a protection racket for the cartels. So when the cops had their hands out, they were on the take. The cartels were paying them to, help traffic or just protect the operation or eliminate competition.
1989, 1990 is when I actually started going out, selling crack cocaine.
What the hell is wrong with you people?
Raymond Hicks says he was one of those detention deputies turned undercover dealers.
Arrest him. He was one of the ringleaders. Arrest this guy. If you're going to arrest all these other people, and I'm not saying that doing this kind of activity warrants an arrest and throwing a guy into a cage as long as he's not harming anybody, threatening to harm anybody, or damaging people's property and not repaying it. But this guy is admitting that he was a drug manufacturer. He's admitting that he was a drug trafficker. He's admitting that he was involved in a drug cartel.
It didn't sit right with me because, working in law enforcement, you're saying how could a department manufacture their own drugs and give it to us to be sold in the street?
Funny enough, it didn't put a dent in the crack problem.
Attorney Ed Hogue represented
Not only did it not put a dent in the crack problem, it exacerbated the crack problem because now you got more drugs out on the street. See, what they say their problem was in this right here, it says they didn't have enough confiscated drugs, so they began making their own. It says right here, a Florida prosecutor says he will seek to vacate as many as 2,600 convictions of people who bought crack cocaine manufactured by the Broward County Sheriff's Office for sting operations between 1988 and 1990. The Florida Supreme Court ruled in 1993 that people couldn't be charged in cases where the sheriff's office made the crack cocaine and undercover deputies sold it to buyers who were arrested and charged. It's never too late to do the right thing. It's just one example of how crack cocaine epidemic in the 1980s and early 1990s led to harsh police practices and heavy criminal penalties. Some people may have been convicted for serious felonies because they bought drugs within 1,000 feet of a school. Conviction under that law required at the time that defendants be sentenced to at least 3 years in prison. It says they were arresting people not for selling, but for purchasing. This guy says they had detention deputies posing as dealers. They would sell it, and these poor people who were addicts were buying it. And the cops were selling it within 1,000 feet of schools, so the penalties would be greater. The cops knew the penalties were greater, and basically they became predators. These cops became predators of people he knew were addicts, so they would make sure they would sell it within this particular zone so they'd get heavier charges. The sheriff's office said at the time that it began making crack because it didn't have enough of the seized drug to use in its sting operations, and because it didn't have to later test the cocaine content of crack made by the sheriff's office chemists. So there wasn't enough crack cocaine on the street to the point where the cops are like, you know what? We got to get some crack cocaine out on the streets over here. So what would you feel? How would you feel if in your neighborhood there wasn't a drug problem and then the cops made a drug problem so that they could apprehend otherwise innocent people and make sure that the charges were as stiff as they could possibly be? That's criminal activity.
Many of those arrested.
For 30 years now, these people have been convicted felons. So anytime they go to apply for a job, anytime they would try to vote, they can't vote.
It's not clear how long it might take to clear arrest records, but current Sheriff Gregory Toney is on board, telling Local 10 in part, "I find the actions of my predecessor to be a miscarriage of justice. Law enforcement officials must never become so desperate in our pursuit to apprehend criminals that we compromise our own integrity."
Wait a second. So if this sheriff is being honest And if he really is sensitized toward justice, and he feels like the actions of his predecessors are a miscarriage of justice, in other words, they engaged in criminal activity, then is he going to seek out and find the people who committed the criminal activity within the Broward County Sheriff's Department and bring them to justice and throw them into cages? Because I don't hear him saying that. And when you hear cops talking like this, you know dang well that they have no intention of going after their own thin blue line members.
I think it's a great thing that he's doing, and I'm hoping and praying that it'll bring these people some closure.
The state attorney's office says there could be as many as 2,600 cases that need to be cleared. We wanted to know, how does that process happen? We did ask for request an interview with the state attorney. We're told at this point, no, they are still working on the details, and it could be a very long process.
At the courthouse.
So drug manufacture and distribution and conviction all in one courthouse. That's right. You can get your Thin Blue Line brand crack. We'll get you high before you say goodbye. Before you take a puff, you'll be in those metallic cuffs. Leave your thoughts about this for the world and the global thought police in the comments section below. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification icon, give it a thumbs up, share it with everybody you know, become a channel member, subscribe to my email list through my website, highimpactflix.com, if you want to support the channel further. Grab a shirt, but more importantly, understand that cops are not now and have not been your friends, and they need to be exposed. I will see you in the next video.